Welcome to the Kind Heartfulness podcast, exploring the inner reaches of the heart and mind, brought to you by Germany-Austria, Germany-Austria, and your host, Eric Solomon.
Welcome back to another episode of the Kind Heartfulness podcast, where we explore the path of living with an open heart and a wise mind. In our practice, we often talk about awareness or presence. But have you ever stopped to ask, what does that actually look like moment to moment? When we say we're resting in the nature of mind or noticing a thought, what is the fine-grained texture of that experience? Well, today we have a very special guest to help us look under the hood of our own meditation. Joining us is Dr. Martijn van Beek, an associate professor of anthropology at Aarhus University and a board member of Mind and Life Europe. Martijn is a pioneer in the field of micro-phenomenology, a fascinating interview technique designed to help us describe the unnoticed microdynamics of our lived experience. Now, today we're going to do something a bit different. Usually we just talk about these concepts, but today we want to show you how this works in real time. In a moment, I'm going to sit and meditate for a short while, but don't worry, through the magic of editing, we won't make you sit through the entire silence in real time. But afterwards, Martijn is going to step into his role as a researcher and interview me about this specific meditation session. You'll get to hear the technique in action as we try to map out the how of a single meditative moment. And I bet you might find that this even helps for your own practice. And then afterwards, we'll zoom out and discuss how this tool can deepen our practice and understanding of what it means to be aware. So let's dive in. Martijn, welcome to the show.
So Eric, as we just discussed, we want to explore a little bit this interview method of micro-phenomenology as a way of both exploring, how people practice, what people actually do when they practice, and also as a way of helping people to explore for themselves what happens. And we talked about how we might, as an example just now for this, for demonstration purposes, so to speak, should just spend a few minutes practicing and then looking at what happens when there's a distraction.
Okay, I'm game. And for those of you,
a little shamatha.
Yeah, for those of you listening, we'll skip the 3 or 5 minutes of practice. There'll be a pause, and then you'll get, so you don't have to just listen to silence while we practice.
Okay, so that's it for a little while. So what do you think? Shall we wrap it up? Is that okay?
Yes.
I didn't actually suggest that you bring your attention to your breathing or anything, but maybe you did that anyway. But
I sometimes would do that, but today I mostly just brought my attention to the sense of my body sitting on the cushion, and then just the feeling of being present.
Okay, so maybe we should have you repeat what you just said. So Eric, can you tell me what you did just now during this brief shamatha practice? What happened?
Well, what first happened was I forgot all about practicing. That I first started wondering what questions you were going to ask me and what I would say. And then I, with a little bit of humor, came to my body, remembered that my job was to just practice. And so I felt the sensation, I'd say, of my bum on the seat, and came into my body, feeling of my body, feeling physically present, and then just present.
Mm-hmm. And then what happened?
Well, gradually, again, I forget after a short time what I was doing. I would start to think, I was very preoccupied by what question you might ask. And I would notice that I became distracted and then come back.
So
I'm trying to do it now as we speak too, so that
right, yeah, that's fine. That's a good idea. Yeah, you can just keep keep your practice going, so to speak. So you started by saying that when we decided that now we were going to sit for a while,
yeah,
that first of all you were thinking a lot and a little humor and
yeah,
curious about what I was going to ask, and but then you settle into your body. You said
yeah,
coming to your body and just being present.
yeah,
And then after a while, you noticed how you'd become distracted,
yes.
and then return to the job at hand. Returning to um, can you describe a little bit more how it developed over the course of the minutes that we were sitting? Were there many such moments? How did it? Was there a progression? How did it develop?
Well, I think that, gradually there's a settling, but I think it's always this little, what I become used to more and more, just the feeling of being present.
Okay. So you're saying in the course of this brief session, you become more and more used to the feeling of being present.
Which I'm somewhat familiar with, of course.
Yeah. So one thing we could do is there are two kinds of things that we might look at. So this kind of method is really useful to look at moments of transition. So where something shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing I could ask you now is whether there is any of these moments where you discover a distraction that stands out more clearly that you could.
You mean what was happening when I was distracted, or?
Yeah, just I remember there was one, so maybe one good place to start, which is very straightforward, is so you're in the beginning, you're in this state where you're just thinking, like, oh, how's this going to work? What's going to happen? What's he going to ask? And then, as you said earlier, you come into your body. So now my question is, how did you begin?
Begin to come into my body? Or
How did you begin to let go of all the thinking and the questions about what is he going to ask and little humor you talked about earlier, and then you say you come into your body and you're just being present. So maybe this first settling into how do you begin?
So the
very
first
first moment when you discover, oops, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. Then what do you do?
Well, I think there's two things. One is what I do, but then there's how I do it. So what I do is, rather than continuing to follow the train of thought, I place my attention someplace else. In this case, I was this feeling of sitting, the sensation of having my bum on the seat. Now,
So then, yeah, and then as you're already suggesting, then the question is, how do you do that? We can even try it now if you want.
yeah, it's really kinesthetic. It's not by thinking.
Right. So it's really kinesthetic. It's not by thinking.
It's not that I think, I may have a thought, oh, I have to put my attention someplace else. But that's actually not what I think. At least, I don't think that's what I'm really doing.
Well, let's try now.
Yeah.
So I've been distracting you by asking questions.
Yeah, exactly. And there's the exact same thing. There's this little, like, inner speediness that I feel, and it's almost like just not trying to get rid of it, not trying to deny it, but just by noticing it, I come almost automatically back to my seat.
Okay. So you're saying it's not because you don't try and get it to go away. You just, you just notice it, and then almost automatically you shift.
Yeah, because it might seem at first like the distraction is all those thoughts, like what is he going to ask me, or what am I going to say, or how, I don't want to embarrass myself, whatever might come up. But underneath it is this unsettled energy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's this unsettled energy that you're sensing. So let's try and really talk about this particular moment, and it can be the one that we're going to have just now, which is where I'm still talking, you're listening to me, and you just drop into, make this shift to just being present.
Okay.
How did you begin?
Yeah. I just allow myself to feel what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
How do I do that? It's noticing the pre-verbal sensation. And I say verbal because what's going on in my mind is verbal, not because I'm speaking. The pre-verbal sensation of speediness
Mm-hmm.
that causes that kind of, you say, maybe even eruption of thoughts, the chain of thoughts that comes. Mm-hmm. And just by coming back to that speediness, then already a kind of settling is taking place.
Mm-hmm. So what I hear you say is that there is a sense of speediness that can become like almost like the pre-verbal potential of, you didn't use that word, but like from which thoughts might erupt.
Mm-hmm. Potential is fine though.
Yeah. And then you say you're just noticing the speediness, and by doing that, rather than the thoughts, but the speediness, that in itself already brings you in the direction of the practice. So just before you notice the speediness,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of going, as you were saying, below the thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
just before you notice that, what do you do?
It's physiological. This is really interesting. I've never tried to explain this before. It's like it's all within my body. We
Mm-hmm.
think it's within our mind. I mean, I used to think it's within I used to think it was in my mind. I'm chasing my thought. I got to come back to my meditation object. Could be the breath. Today it's not the breath, but it's actually just feeling the body.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying, and if I hear correctly, is that you go from being caught in your thoughts to this presence with, or feeling it's very kinesthetic, you said, and it's sort of very much the body that you're contacting or sensing, and that's, we, from, in a micro-phenomenological language, we would say there's an inner gesture that happens.
Yes, I understand what you get.
Micro gesture from being caught up in, the content of your thoughts, maybe, to a small redirection where you bring your attention more to the sensation of your body.
Yes, I understand. And when I said yes, by the way, I'm not saying that, yes, I knew the term micro gesture, but I understood that in a way that's what you were asking me.
Yeah. And normally we wouldn't bring that into an interview like this, but now, this is a demonstration kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. So that's okay.
So that particular gesture, so we could say maybe that's the first thing that you say happens, is this sort of noticing the speediness. And then it sounded like from that speediness, you then make another gesture.
Yeah.
Or something happens. You said earlier that in that moment of noticing the speediness that is underneath the thought activity, there is an automatic, I think, almost, you said, shift into this more practicing.
Yeah. So the question is, and this makes it difficult, this is a well-practiced gesture on my part.
Of course.
And
well, we can do it now. So now you're,
I'm trying.
So and just see what happens when you go back into, just being present, as you said earlier.
It's like by not chasing the content, but staying with the energy, all by itself, it releases.
So by not chasing the content, but staying with the energy.
So the content is whatever I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I get it.
Right?
Yeah.
And even here, like a little bit like, oh, how do I explain this to him? And you see, even that, oh, how do I explain this to him? There's, you can feel, you probably can feel the energy I'm experiencing just by the way I say it. And normally, when I'm distracted, that's the chain. But it's instead of, so the first micro gesture is this opening up to the sensation of the body, whatever it is. The second is this almost like I want to say allowing, however it is, to just be.
So
without feeling like I have to fix it, like, oh, I'm not meditating, right? Oh, look, I'm distracted. Just allowing to be.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff we could look closer at, but here's what I'm curious about initially.
Yeah.
You say you're noticing the speediness.
Yeah.
Where do you notice it?
Well, right now, it's sort of in my chest area. Sort of in between the heart and the throat.
Can you try and put some words to it? Describe it for me.
Yeah, the difficult thing is as soon as I kind of just fully, it dissipates. But it's, I'm saying speediness. I could say it's like nervous is too strong, but it's like a very, very slight discomfort.
Very slight discomfort.
Yeah.
What is it that makes it possible for you to say that it is discomfort?
Because of how it feels when I stop reifying through.
Right. So you're saying how it feels when you stop raving.
Yeah.
So what does it feel like? Because you're saying how it feels when, so what do you feel? Exactly. You should try and describe that.
It's just from within, a kind of deep relaxation, even if I'm not completely relaxed. How do I say that? In other words, there can still be a little speediness.
The discomfort of the speediness comes from what? What is it that you find discomfortable?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the right word.
Just try something.
Yeah. It's, in other words, like it starts with the blah, 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 blah in my head, right? Then there's that shift to noticing, you could say the source. That, I'm calling it discomfort because it's...
What is it you're feeling?
Well, now I feel quite relaxed and open.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
But you understand what I'm trying to ask?
I do.
Yeah. So the speediness has
Can I say one meta thing that I find interesting here is it's not that I don't understand what you're saying. I do. And I do kind of, like on a pre-verbal level, I think I understand this. But finding how to talk about it, that's difficult.
Yeah. And that's one of the really interesting things with this method is that by going deeper and deeper into the micro moments of a particular experience and all the different things that are happening at any particular moment in an experience, we can sometimes get into this, domain where words just, don't, it's hard to put language to it.
Yeah.
And then we try anyway, even though the language fails maybe. And sometimes by trying on different words, maybe, you get a certain insight into, oh yeah, well, it's a little bit like that, but that's not quite it. So, for example, would you like to continue with this sort of initial settling in? So we've looked a little bit at the sense of speediness, and it's located in your chest area, between your throat and your heart area at that time. And there's a sense of discomfort, and it sort of dissipates when you what is it you do before it dissipates?
It's just allowing it to be how it is,
Okay.
without the temptation, the speediness is like, I've got to do something.
Mm.
And it's almost like undoing.
Mm.
It's catching that I've got to do something and just not allowing myself not to do anything.
Okay, so there's a sense.
Just be with it. Just be with it. Let that be the object of it. You're fully present at that point. That's your object. I'm sorry, I should use first person. I'm fully present at that point. It's just allowing that to be my object of meditation.
So how do you do that?
It's a kind of welcoming, sort of like the antithesis of I've got to do something about it.
So what do you do to welcome? When you say it's welcoming, kind of welcome.
It's a very, very slight openness, almost you could say curiosity.
Mm-hmm. So if there's an openness and a curiosity that you bring to it, or that you allow, or whatever, what's that just before? If you can.
Just before is this kinesthetic acknowledgement of the speediness.
Mm.
This just feeling the sensation itself rather than trying to describe it. Or it can be a description that comes, but that's not, I don't have to converse with it or interact with it, and just stay with the kinesthetic sensation of feeling this.
Okay. So how do you do that? So you've talked about all the things that you could be doing that you don't do, right?
Yeah.
To stay on target.
The reason I find it hard to explain is it's all on the level of like, it's pre-verbal. It's feeling. It's like, you're saying yes.
So what is it
It's not a mystery to me in the sense, like sometimes it's like when I've watched you do this with someone else, a little bit I was like, oh, how do I do that? But here I don't feel like, because now we're doing it together, I don't have the sense of, oh, I don't know. I'm just having the sense of, how do I say that?
Mm.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So okay.
I mean, can I say how I'm finding, I do find this helpful.
Yeah.
I do find this helpful because it's...
We're not done yet, but...
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize.
No, you don't have to apologize. It's just that...
the little speedy...
If we go back to if we take this sort of progression from, before we really started, and the initial sort of, what's he going to talk about, and the joy and the curiosity and all that kind of stuff, and then you sort of discover, okay, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing, and you go to the body, you say, and you notice a speediness, and then in that noticing, which is centered in your chest area, between your heart and your throat.
Today.
You are, we're only talking about what happens now, right? We're not talking.
Yeah, sorry.
So so you're noticing this speediness, and in the moment of noticing, it already begins to dissipate, you say. And I asked you about how does that happen, or what do you do there? And you said, well, it's like a more like a welcoming. You could be doing all sorts of things to try and get it to go away, but that's not what you're doing. You know that's not the way to do it. But there's this kind of welcoming and a curiosity, and it's sort of, it sounds like it does itself to a certain extent.
Yeah, definitely.
So now here's the question. Earlier, right at the beginning, you said you come into the body, and then you're just after a short while you're just present.
Mm.
How do you know you're just present?
I almost want to say because I'm not distracted. It's more like the absence of something than the actual. I mean, sure, when I feel very present, I feel relaxed. I feel open. There's a natural kind of spaciousness. I feel this right now. I can talk to you.
Mm.
It's not distracting to discuss because this is what's happening.
Mm.
But for example, while discussing with you, I'm not thinking, oh, what am I going to have for lunch after this is over?
Mm.
For example, this just one of the first times I became really, really aware of this was when I first met Tuba Origin.
Mm.
He gave pointing out instruction, but before all of that was so remarkable that I was with someone and all kind of like speculation about past and future, it just was gone. There's something about him that, it's not that I never had that at any other time, but it was just so acutely obvious. And so here, while we're speaking about this, I'm not projecting or reflecting.
That's the. Yeah, I know what you're, what you're describing makes a lot of sense in terms of also how the tradition talks about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Which I'm probably totally polluted by,
No, yeah, but
infused with.
That's true for all of us. And of course, what we're trying to do with this kind of interviews to
get beyond the
get to the concreteness of that.
Yeah.
Which, of course, in a way is ironic because at some point there isn't any concreteness there.
Yes.
And so what you were saying is that, well, it's more an absence of all sorts of other things than something positively describable.
Yeah.
And yet, if I asked you, I could ask, this is not a micro-phenomenological question, but I could turn it into a micro-phenomenological question, which is the one that I asked before. But how do you know then that now you're just present? What is the test you're applying for yourself, as it were?
Yeah, there's no test.
I know that's way too coarse, right?
Yeah. No, I mean it's just it's almost like, how do you know? Because you're not testing. It's the absence thing.
Yeah.
It's as soon as you start checking, is this it? Am I present? Almost like you're not.
Yeah.
Right? Because now you're in some meta space.
Yeah. So here's a question. So as we do these kinds of explorations, one of the things we always ask, first of all, is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't talked about, or something in this initial experience, something that we have been looking at that you haven't had a chance to talk about that you think might be interesting?
No, thank you. I think it's okay.
And the other question, of course, is So what was it like to be invited to explore your contemplative practice this morning in this very simple form?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a person that has a lot of habits of an insecure person. I guess I can't be that insecure because I'm now admitting it on to the world. But I do have these habits, and I had some thought of what will it be like to be interviewed, and then what will people think of my practice and all this. But what I found really interesting is that I didn't have that while we were doing it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting.
Why do you think that was?
Well, I think you invited me to just be in that space, and I took your invitation. Why not? It's great. I can practice and do a podcast at the same time. Right?
Yeah.
I think there is something nice about the way you lead the interview, at least for me, that made me feel very comfortable. And when you ask questions, it came across as very friendly. So I didn't feel like I had a lot of meta conversation about it, which I thought I was kind of expecting, honestly.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, we've met before.
Yeah.
And we talked together and a nice connection, so that helps.
Yes.
And also what's really important for this particular kind of interview, where we're not studying a particular issue, or I'm looking to get data out of you.
That's true.
It's really
It's okay if you were.
Yeah, but it's like one of the ways I use the method also with friends is as a way of helping somebody explore their practice. And I'm not teaching, I'm only holding up the mirror, so to speak, and trying to help you look at different ways, different aspects of what was really just one short moment of settling into your practice, really. And then repeating in a way that initial sort of, so what do I do when, what do you do when you go from a distraction to just being present? Was there anything in of course we're very familiar with these kinds of practices ourselves, but was there anything that you thought, interesting?
I think the whole thing was interesting because on one hand, I do see how it's almost like meditation practice for me is a pre-compiled response. I just do it.
Yeah.
At the same time, what I found interesting in this talk is it's like it reinforces some of the good habits I have, and brings it to conscious mind. And as we went along, I felt it was easier and easier to stay in that space, such that like at the end, when you were asking, I said, I can be very present and talk to you. That, I mean, I know I can do that sometimes, but I can't do it. It's not like a switch I can always throw. And here it was no problem. And I think it's because of the way both you invited me in, but the way I became more and more aware of what I was doing and what was going on. So I think I can see how this could be incredibly, incredibly helpful. I think for me personally today, I would say it's helpful. Yeah.
Excuse me. I mean, we people that use this method, people that I know that are also meditation teachers, they may not use the formal method, like it would be used in a research context, but the kind of way of inviting people to explore their practice, they find really, really useful as a way of working with students. And you can also apply it to yourself. So if you've had a meditation session where you're trying to, there's a particular practice you're doing, just like this, or anything really. You can decide beforehand there's certain aspect of your practice that you're sort of interested in, and then systematically explore with these kinds of invitations to yourself to look again and again and again at this basic mindfulness gesture of noticing a distraction, bringing your attention back, for example, to the breath. However you're used to working with the breath. And that initial, there's a lot happening in that one very simple gesture. There's a noticing of the distraction, and how does that begin? Why do you notice it right there? What is it that leads you to notice that there's a distraction? And then what do you do to let go of the distraction? What do you do to redirect your attention? How do you know you've landed on target, so to speak? And what do you do then to, and that whole sequence, each moment of that sequence of micro transitions or gestures. You could spend time exploring for yourself or with the help of somebody else.
Maybe. Oh, sorry.
Of course, there's a sort of a diminishing return and a risk of getting completely, like fascinated with what am I doing, and that's not quite the point of meditation. But most people don't have that problem that they then get completely obsessed with that. But it's in a way this kind of these basic contemplative gestures we can explore ourselves or with a fellow practitioner who's not necessarily our teacher. And then we can keep the serious questions for the interactions with our teachers.
Yeah. I think that maybe one thing that might be helpful for our listeners, because I mean, I saw you do this once last summer with someone else. And actually I started a little bit applying to my practice. I'm wondering if you could say some things very specific that would be helpful to people listening. What are the questions, or if they were going to try to use this in their own practice, what could you say that would help them do that?
Well, first of all, anything that is like an explanation or a generalization or using the language of the tradition, technical terms, are not really interesting. So we try and stick as closely as possible to the concreteness of the experience. So when you're saying energy, we didn't unpack that, but when you say energy, what is it you're referring to? What is it you're actually sensing that you call energy? Because we all may use that concept and we probably use it in similar ways, but why do we use that language, and what is it actually we're sensing at that moment? So there's one thing about really sticking with the concreteness. The other one is basically you have to find one moment, and if it's a simple gesture, you can do it while, as we did while you're talking together, and you go back. You in a way you follow the flow of that gesture, and you go back to the beginning again and again and again. And the way you ask the question is always, if you let's go back to the beginning. So how did it begin, or what happened, or what did you do? And then you try and use the words that the person themselves used to invite them to explore that deeper. And so when the person is in the experience, like you were saying, some of the anxiety or whatever might be present in a situation like that, it kind of disappears, because when you really get in touch with the experience or with the practice, either practicing in the moment or the past experience, those concerns kind of disappear because you're focused on, or you're present in that experience as it unfolds now in during the interview. And so some of the questions that I was asking, like, how do you know that now you're, what is it that you're, how do you know you're present, and so on. Those kinds of questions are really important. So you don't take people's word for it. It's not because we don't believe them, but there is always an invitation to go a step deeper, and you really want to try and pay attention to. So like what you were saying, I go into the body. Now, most of the time we would say, yeah, okay, I know what that's like, and you may be doing it slightly differently than me, but we know what, so there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
But in fact, there's an awful lot to talk about, because every time we sit, either for a formal session, we sit to practice, or just in daily life, we take a moment to practice. There is, that's really our main practice, so to speak, is to go from distraction to the practice. And how do we do that? And people probably do it differently, and exploring the way you do it for yourself in actuality, rather than in theory or using the language that the tradition of it, is really informative. And when you help people explore their experience in this way, you're really just there to help them explore their experience. You're not there to teach them something or correct them or anything like that. And that's really important. If you have a teacher role, then that may come in, but still then you want to give enough time for the person to really explore these different aspects of their practice. And so you ask questions about the concreteness of the experience. And you explore both what happens sort of sequentially over time, what we call diachronically, through time. And then you also explore what happens in any particular moment in different sensory modalities, for example. And we were spending quite a bit of time on this kinesthetic, the body sensations and so on. but we could do the same, with the mind, or this redirecting of attention, the way we orient our attention, whether we make it wide or we make it more focused, whether we go close to an object or we take a step back and more receptive. All these kinds of mind gestures are really interesting to explore also.
Yes. Yeah. I can see how this would be very, very helpful.
And it's not about the content of the experience in a way. It's about how do you do this, and how does that unfold?
Which is actually goes hand in hand with how we ought to be practicing anyway, because the main point of meditation practice, normally we're very preoccupied with the content of experience. But in meditation practice, what we're learning, you can say, is instead of focusing on the content, redirect your attention to someplace else. So there's an old Dzogchen example of the difference between a lion and a dog. Nusho Rinpoche was famous for telling this, and we actually put it in our book, Pachok Rinpoche and I, because Pachok Rinpoche had this amusing story from when he was a teenager and getting angry a lot. And so they say when you throw a stone at a dog, what does a dog do? He chases the stone. And that's how we are with our stones, our thoughts, emotions, and sensations. We're chasing them, playing. Sometimes we're running from them, but we're always like, it's the stone. Now, when you throw a stone at a lion doesn't care at all about the stone. He looks to see where the stone's coming from. And so, to put it to me, we can spend countless lifetimes chasing our stones, never looking where the stone comes from, the mind itself, the essence of mind's nature itself. And so first in meditation practice, we're just learning how not to chase the stones. And then, gradually and under the guidance of a qualified master, we learn to look at this in a very special way, the stone thrower. So this, I can see as an incredible support for, at the very least, not chasing the stone, becoming more and more aware of how to unwind that process. Is that correct? Do I understand this?
I think so. I mean, I think for me, it's a way of helping people see how they themselves are involved in the practice. And of course, that's in a way a really silly thing to say, but it's the mental or the mind gestures that we make that are closely related to what we do with our body. So the embodied nature of our practice is not trivial. And of course, there are lots of ways we work with the body, but when you do this kind of exploration, you already, you say you go into the body, usual way of very common way of settling into your practice. But then a lot of what we notice when we're not distracted by thoughts is that we are, in a way, aware of bodily sensations, vibrations of different kinds. And those, of course, also become objects that are distracting us, even though we also take maybe as signs of, okay, we're going in the right direction. I can feel I'm becoming more relaxed, and we explore that. How do you know you're relaxed? Well, and then you use language of opening up and inviting. So there are all these kinesthetic metaphors also that we use, and they do relate to actual physical sensations. And that's not a mistake, it's just the way it is. But exploring that also can be really helpful, because you get into a deeper contact with the kinesthetic dimensions of practice, which, for example, when we're working with the subtle body, is really useful. So anyway, so the method is really helping to sharpen one's awareness about what we do with our attention, for example, with our mind in general. And this whole sort of multidimensional, multimodal way in which we are present in the world and in relation to ourselves, and how by exploring that more systematically, which is basically what all practice is about, we become more aware of these habits that are helpful or not helpful. and we can work with them more systematically. And usually, if you give somebody in the instruction, basic mindfulness, you try and sort of sense your body, and then bring your attention to the breath. When you notice you're distracted, bring your attention back to the breath. That's the basic instruction. How people actually do that, we don't spend so much time on normally. And in a sense, that might be seen as a distraction. But I think for the people that I've interviewed, many of those people feel it's a really empowering way of being helped to explore their practice, because they actually learn something. Like you were saying, these are very familiar gestures, but there's something you can discover about how you go about things. And, if necessary, if you feel that it's necessary, or if you're in relationship to a teacher, you might want to adjust something, because you always get, you get too caught up in the sensations in your body, or, yeah. So, and one of the metaphors that one of the people I interviewed, very experienced practitioner, he said that it's the effect of doing this very thoroughly. Normally I do about an hour and a half at the most of one interview, and it can be about just a few minutes, or a short sequence in a practice period. And we explored it in detail. What people sometimes say, with this one practitioner in particular used this metaphor, he said, afterwards it's like the mirror has been polished.
Yeah.
There's a sense that the mind is clearer because it's been helped to, look more deeply into its own workings. And I
can
think
see that. Yeah.
I've heard that in different forms from different people. And what can be really interesting is doing a sequence of interviews with the same person basically about the same practice, also over a couple of weeks, once a week or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, I just think because over the last years I've been teaching and doing, well, I do lots of practice interviews and lots of, I find there's a real hunger that the whole guru to disciple ratio has changed a lot since I started studying Buddhism, meaning people have less access to qualified masters. There's fewer of them considering the amount of interest. So there's a huge hunger in people to be able to ask questions and have them answered. But one thing I notice is that again and again and again is people get too caught up in the technique and not enough paying attention to what's going on for them, so to speak. And I mean this I think on the level that you're saying. And I'm actually thinking a lot about how to adopt some of the things I've learned just in the little bit that I've interacted with you, and bring that into some of these interviews, because just myself, when I started practicing, and it was the first meditation technique I learned was placing my attention on my breath, and it becomes very cerebral, which I was already a pretty cerebral kid. I was like a math science kid, and I learned to meditate when I was 15 or 16. And it didn't really, in one way it was helpful, another way it was just reinforcing a habit I already had, right? And so something like this would have been really, really beneficial back then.
I mean, what you're saying about the focus on technique, I mean, there's a danger, of course, with this kind of method, way of exploring, that people get totally obsessed with how am I actually making that gesture. But the point is to recognize it, and forget about it, so to speak. It's the effect of the exploration in a way that the interesting part. And the focus on embodiment, I mean, it's very much present in the way I'm taught by my teacher.
Yeah.
So maybe one of the things that I mentioned in the WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Which is, and it's related to what you were saying about, working with students and the availability of masters and so on declining because there are so many students now. I think, so one of the things that one could ask is, But isn't it all this talking about one's experience a problem, given that the tradition often emphasizes one should not talk about one's practice with other people than one's teacher and maybe, one close Dharma friend.
Yes.
And I think, of course, that there is an important number of important reasons for that traditional injunction against speaking about your experience. But here, I feel that we're not interested in a way in all the colorful landscapes that people might encounter on a good day or on a bad day in their practice. Rather, we're looking at the basics of practice. And
I think there's a few things. First of all, maybe because you're studying with a different teacher, maybe the way it's explained is slightly different. But I've actually heard much more that it's like you don't discuss signs in practice, and you don't discuss if you've had pointing out instruction into the nature of mind, then you wouldn't discuss that. However, if you receive teachings with someone, then it's okay as Dharma friends to go through it. But the real reason, what's the reason for the injunction? It's to not solidify, because the whole practice is about learning how to be okay with not solidifying. It's not not solidifying, it's just being okay with not happening and catching the unnecessary solidification. And so, if you and I talk about it, oh, that was so blissful, and then we create an energy that could become an obstacle. Or if I say, I was practicing and I actually had this or that amazing, mind-blowing metaphysical thing happen, then we run the risk of a kind of ego state that's antithetical to good practice. So here, and certainly with shamatha practice, and then I think then it's perfectly okay to discuss that. I think it's important to discuss that, and here this kind of interview could be incredibly beneficial. And then, for doing it with Dzogchen or Mahamudra practitioners, I think that's something that's up to the teacher who is the main teacher of those students. So if that teacher were to say, yes, Martin, I think this would be really helpful, please do it with my students, then it's totally fine. But that's something, because of the student-teacher bond, that's the only thing that has to be negotiated.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff I've only done in my own community. I mean, my community, but the community I belong to.
Yes.
And that's been very interesting.
But also, you're not really being prescriptive. You're not telling me how to practice.
No,
you're just bringing, and I think that's also sort of okay anyway. I mean, it makes it very different. So we're back with
Martijn van Beek.
Martijn van Beek. I will try to overcome my tendency to make everything an American name, and
it's okay to call me Martin, or
I'm sure everybody.
I've been exposed to all sorts of ways that people try and pronounce it. So
But I'd like to return to what we were saying, and maybe ask you a little bit about the history of micro-phenomenology and what the background is into developing this technique.
Yeah. So the person who's sort of the main guru of micro-phenomenology is somebody called Claire Petit-Mangin, who was a PhD student under Francisco Varela, actually. And Claire adapted a similar kind of interview technique called the explicitation interview, which was developed by a French psychologist called Pierre Vermersch, who developed it also. Anyway, so Claire is the one who did her doctoral work under Varela using this method to help people explore what happens just before an epileptic seizure. It helped those people discover certain early warning signs. Anyway, and I learned it from Claire, and we've worked together in different research contexts. And actually, way back in 2013, I think we, for the first time, tried to use it in connection with a study of meditation experience. So there are some articles that were published. The first one was called "What is it like to meditate?" and that came out of this pilot project. And last autumn we actually ran a seminar, taught a course on the use of micro-phenomenology in the context of meditation research, with participation of a whole bunch of excellent meditation researchers. And it's become very, very popular in lots of different contexts as a research method. So it's kind of all over now, being used to study, I mean, just about anything imaginable where first-person experience is interesting. So Claire has a website that we can, maybe share the link to, where people can find both more about the technique, but also links to the different kinds of research publications that are coming out from different people that are part of this network. Claire's like the center in this network of micro-phenomenologists, and it's if people are interested in finding out more, that's the easiest way to.
Yes, and I think most of our listeners know, but just in case, you can always find important links that are relevant to the episode in the episode description, whether it's Spotify, Apple, or any other way that you found the episode. There will be links.
There's one particular article that Claire published a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, called "The Veiling and Unveiling of Experience," which is specifically looking at parallels between the microphenomenological interview technique and meditation as ways of discovering and then letting go of, or making it easier to discover how you are yourself veiling your experience, which is, of course, as we know, the problem.
That's
and and she in that article, she makes reference to Sanskrit sources and so on, so Buddhist philosophy, and so that's a really good resource also. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful that you could join us today. I'm so grateful, and I feel like I learned something. So at least speaking for myself, I'm particularly happy, and I hope that you'll consider joining us again one day.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me, and it was fun, and let's hope the listeners also get a sense of what this method might help them with, if they're interested in exploring.
Well, I encourage people who are listening to follow up with the links to learn more about this work, and I do think that you gave in the middle of our podcast there some helpful tips about how we can use some of these techniques on ourselves. I know I'll be using them more and more in practice interviews in the future, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, we like to invite you to continue the journey into the heart of enlightened mind at gomde.eu.